This episode is made possible by listeners like you. Your support means everything. Thank you for tuning in. On this episode of the podcast, he meets a Jane Fuller who claims she Hanan's daughter, right? Who apparently he has never met before. This is the very first time. You know what I'm saying? Him supposedly know Fuller, right? Kind of work with him, and he has never met his daughter, right? And big woman, right? And apparently she seems to kind of have a thing for him, because you can see she kind of like, yeah, give him the wink, you know what I'm saying? You guys know the wink, right? Yeah. Yeah, that happened. You're not gonna want to miss this one.
Prepare for warp speed as we embark on a voyage through the vast expanse of science fiction in movies and television series. From distant planets to alien civilizations, we delve into the heart of the unknown, unraveling the tales that have captivated audiences for generations. Get ready to unlock the secrets of the universe on Flix.
Welcome to Flix, where we analyze sci-fi and fantasy TV shows and movies through the lens of reality. I'm your host, Andre Bonner, and today I unpack the 13th floor, virtual realities, hidden truths, and the nature of existence. I've been looking at the numbers lately, and I have to say thank you. The downloads are growing, the listens are growing, and people are clearly enjoying the podcast. But me notice one little problem. Plenty of uno listening, but not enough uno subscribing. If you've been rocking with Codeflix every week, laughing, thinking, and diving into these sci-fi worlds with me, and you still haven't hit the subscribe or follow button, me I wait. Me I beg you. Just take 2 seconds and subscribe. It might seem like a small thing, but it makes a huge difference. It tells the platforms that people are enjoying the show, helps more sci-fi fans discover the podcast, and it keeps Codeflix growing. So, if you're listening right now, pause for just a second. Hit follow, hit subscribe, maybe even leave a rating while you're there. Alright? Enough begging. Now, back to the podcast. The first time I watched The 13th Floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen parts of the story before. Virtual worlds that people can jack into, truths hidden in plain sight, and the unsettling idea that our very existence might not be what we think it is. It's a kind of movie that has you questioning reality all over again. The story begins with a murder, but that's not only the beginning. What starts as a simple investigation slowly turns into a mystery that peels back layer after layer, revealing why things are the way they are, and forcing the characters to confront truths they never imagined. Every character plays their part perfectly, moving the story forward as the lines between the real world and the artificial one becomes harder and harder to separate. The deeper we go, the more we begin to ask the same questions they do. What is real? How much of our lives is actually under our control? And what happens if everything we ever known is nothing more than an illusion? Released in the same year as The Matrix, it's easy to see why this film was overshadowed. But the 13th Floor has carved out its own loyal following, becoming one of science fiction's hidden gems. By the time the credits roll, you'll be left staring at the screen, wondering if reality is really as solid as it seems. Welcome to the 13th Floor. The 13th Floor is a 1999 science fiction film written and directed by Joseph Rusnak and produced by Roland Emmerich's Centropolis Entertainment. Loosely based on Daniel F. Goyer's 1964 novel, Simulacron 3. It is a remake of Rainier Warner Fassbinder 1973's miniseries World on a Wire. The film stars Craig Burkle, Gretchen Mol, Armin Mulier-Stahl, Vincent D'Onofrio, and Dennis Haybert. In 2000, the 13th Floor was nominated for the Saturn Award for Best Science Fiction Film, but lost it to The Matrix. These are my personal insights and interpretations of the 13th Floor, including some of my favorite moments, themes, and characters. So, right out the bat, again, I just have to say this is like copy and paste, copy and paste. You just copy and paste certain things from this film to The Matrix, and you got a film, right? It's not necessarily about one single person, though. We get a range of characters and things, which makes it a little bit different. And perhaps if it had gotten, a bigger, following, right, it would have beat out The Matrix. We'd actually be talking about the 13th Floor part part thrust, So we could never tell, you know what I'm saying? But the timelines, in reality has shed the light on it that yes, this film, I found it, when I was looking for other films similar to The Matrix, right? And I saw it, and I don't know if I had watched it at the time when I saw it, or I just did end up doing something else. But when I, was looking at some other episodes to do for this podcast, right, I realized I need to do an episode about the 13th Floor because, there is a cult following, right? It's one of those films that is in the same category as or close to the same category as Dark City, which we have done on this podcast. Wink, wink. You can go check it out, right? And it's quite an interesting details, and as we get into it, you'll see why I am making, these assessments. So sit back and relax and enjoy this deep dive. So in 1999, Los Angeles, right? Of course, some of us set it in the same year as the film release, right? Hanan Fuller, right, is this multi-billion dollar computer enterprise, inventor, right? And he has created this virtual reality, right, simulation, right, of 1937 Los Angeles, right? It is filled with some human beings who seem to be very unaware. They are computer programs in actual fact, right? So right there, you can see the parallels with the Matrix right there, right? So now Fuller him jacking and thing, because we get introduced to him in the very first scene, and we see him go into this hotel and thing and meeting up with this girl and thing. You know what I'm saying? So we are saying, hey, wait, what go on here? So this old man here now, old and cold, him quite the fire stick, if you get what I mean. So this old man decides say him going to go home now to him wife, and when him reach home to him wife, she says she smell cigarette smoke on him, and the way she say it, you can see say, boy, this is not a one-time thing. Probably he has been doing this quite often. So I wonder, you know what I'm saying, what's next? He lies there for a while, and he doesn't seem to be falling asleep, at least, and probably guilt rack him. And then we see his eyes. In his eyes, start to do some weird stuff with the lights and stuff. And then, we get to say he is in the simulation, and him come out of a simulation now, right? And he's in this facility. You can see the servers behind him and everything and whatever. And he goes out and he goes to a bar, right? And in the bar, he sees this guy and stuff and thing. Oh, there's another bar scene that was in the simulation. I must mention that first, right? So in that bar scene, he meets up with this bartender at the bar, when they leave or to go home, and he gives him a envelope, right? And in that envelope, it would have been something for Douglas Hall, right? Douglas Hall is basically is second, right, at the company. So when he exits the simulation, that's where we're at, right? And he goes to the bar and thing, and he meets up with his bartender, right? And the bartender was watching him closely. He said that he needed to use a telephone, right? And he goes and he makes a call, right? And he starts to talk because it's voicemail, right? And he must say, boy, I may discover something very interesting. And we want to hear the rest of the conversation, but we're not given that opportunity at that point. The only thing we see next happening is that he's on the phone, the door opens, and someone apparently, it seems like the very same person who he much try to get through on the phone to, because the way him react, right? The way him react is almost like, oh, me da talk to you on the phone, me da leave a message for you on the phone, but you don't hear him say anything, He goes with this person and thing, and we don't see the person's face all I know, right? And him say, there's something like him ready for confess and tell the man something, and he gets stabbed with a knife. Yeah. So he gets murdered and thing, So right after that, we see the next scene. This man, Douglas Hall, as I mentioned before, he wakes up and he goes to his bathroom. And when he goes to his bathroom, he sees blood, right? On the sink, and also on some towel, like, what I'm saying, like somebody that try to clean themselves from blood, He becomes the primary suspect, right? Because, yeah, what I'm saying, the investigation is leading there, as well as the fact say when him wake up him find these blood garments and so on, what I'm saying? So he's interrogated by the LAPD direct detective Larry McBain. And McBain, I would know him from the series 24. He was the president that Jack Bauer had to protect and stuff, And yeah, 24 is a great series. If you ever watched that, please go check it out. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we are plug it in right here. So he meets a Jane Fuller who claims say she Hanan's daughter, right? Who apparently he has never met before. This is the very first time. You know what I'm saying? Him supposedly know Fuller, right? Kind of work with him, and he has never met his daughter, right? and big woman, right? And apparently she seems to kind of have a thing for him, because you can see she kind of like, yeah, give him the wink, you know what I'm saying? You guys know the wink, right? Yeah. Now, all, of course, romance are and thing, and, now, after that, the same bartender who would have witnessed when Fuller went on the phone, him claim say him see him Douglas a kill Fuller, so him know, you know what I'm saying? So it's almost like him want blackmail him and thing, right? And him hold on Fuller and like him ready for beat him, you know what I'm saying, and thing, and Fuller just, turn it back on him and run out, you know what I'm saying? Now, them catch up to Douglas and then decide, say, them going to put him in jail for the time being because them have evidence, this man come forward, cause, him not get the blackmail where him did want for blackmail him with. So him, tell upon him and things. So him end up got jail and things. So Jane now come and, right, give him an alibi. You see me I say? So that's, what I'm saying, you're wondering to yourself, say, why is it that she go out to this length now for protect him? You know what I'm saying? So him co-worker, Jason, who in actual fact is also the same actor, D'Onofrio, right? Vincent D'Onofrio, where, from Men in Black, who I spoke about in that episode and stuff. Masterful performance here, right? Because he plays a mild-mannered colleague to Douglas, right? And then in the simulation, he plays a bartender, right? So Douglas goes to Jason and him say, yo, I need your help because I need for jack in to the simulation because we know say, Fuller always love going at simulation them and thing, you know what I'm saying? So he goes in there to find out what happened to Fuller. So, he goes in as this man named Ferguson, right? Who is this bank teller guy. And when he initially goes in, he's seated in front of this lady in a bank, right? And, he has this confused look on his face. And I'm like, huh? You know what I'm saying? Like, but he gets himself out of there, you know what I'm saying? Even the manager of the bank is like, Ferguson, you need to go home and thing. If at one point him like Master Team say, you need a smoke? You need a smoke or something? And he's like, no, I'm not smoke. And he say, since when? So he was very out of character for the guy who it would be the body that he is possessing, right? So he goes to find out, about Fuller's, him have retrace some of the steps them where him can find him. Actually go meet up with the guy, the guy who Fuller would have been inhabiting, right? And the guy is like, boy, he's totally different from Fuller, right? He don't really know anything and stuff. So he goes to the very same hotel where the bar is, that same bartender that I mentioned, played by D'Onofrio. He would have gotten a note from Fuller, but now it's like he has never heard of anybody, and you know what I'm saying, him not have anything from him or not like that, cause him ask him, and he's like, yo, me don't know nothing about it and thing. One of the things that was even quite, crazy was the fact that this is the first time that Douglas finds out that Fuller has been using the simulation as the playground, right? He was, jacking in and going to basically, see these young girls and stuff and thing, all of that. So that's when he find out all of that and stuff. So yeah, there's a time limit that they had set. Him tell himself he set it for 120 minutes, right? Which is actually about 2 hours and stuff. So when he leaves, we see in the simulation, right, where the counterpart, not recognizing where he is, right, I try to leave, and the bartender is like, you know, calling him and thing because him leave the hat when him that wear, right? And him even get him for drink. So basically those two now, because the bartender realized him act strange, him was very intrigued for some reason in Ferguson's story. You know what I'm saying? Because now he might ask him, something, and he's like, no, my name Ferguson. You know what I'm saying? My name Douglas. My name Ferguson, right? So little after that, now Douglas enter back the simulation, right? And him go back for visit back Ashton, right? And this time him come with the guy who would have been Fuller's counterpart, right? And the guy I say, because what happens is that when they leave the simulation, right, they leave memories in the counterparts, right? So basically that memory has now become a part of the person, right? So even the counterpart now, I realize they have been to the hotel before, them know these girls, them know so many different things. So him actually remember that, he gave the letter to the bartender. So when Douglas goes after him, of course, he realized now, say, that's Ashton, the bartender. He realized, say, Douglas will come after him. So he, quickly take himself out of it. But Douglas catches up to him only for him to pull a gun on Douglas. Right? He basically I say, yo, me read the letter, me read the stinking letter, and I realize, say, this world is not what it is. You know what I'm saying? He basically tell him, say, yo, it's an artificial creation. The man say, yo, me go somewhere where me never really thought of going, right? I'm just driving on my car, just continue driving, driving, driving. And when I reach out there, I was amazed at what I saw. And then, they're showing you as he's talking, him driving out to the place and, him coming out of the car. We don't get to see what he's looking at, but we know that for some reason, this shattered his entire reality for him. You know what I'm saying? Because this man I talk about the fact say, yo, him don't know what real and thing and whatever. And he starts to shoot Douglas, right? Douglas get couple shots in his foot and thing. Now when Douglas jacked in this time around, he was alone. Jason wasn't there for guide or for watch while go on and for set the time limit on him in the simulation. So essentially, he was basically stuck in there by himself. So, Ashton a run him down and thing, him a hop on him leg and thing and whatever. The two of them end up in this area where there's this pool and, them tussle and till they end up in a pool and thing. And Ashton a drown him, right? A drown Douglas in a water. And just at that moment before he completely goes blank, he gets pulled out of the simulation, luckily by Jason. Yeah. And the thing is that, it's kind of visceral because you get ripped from that reality into the other reality. And, you know what I'm saying? It's the same face that you see because Jason and Ashton, them, are played by the same actor. So, the whole thing was to just kind of give that feeling that, hey, him couldn't, you know what I'm saying? Him not realize him actually come out of simulation. It's almost like him feel like him still there in there. And, it's Ashton. When he realize that, oh, it's not Ashton or Jason, because him box him, him box him. And, Jason is like, him mild mannered, say, like, oh, why you box me? You know what I'm saying? So it has changed the way how you look at things, and the fact say all of these things happen, they would have foreshadowed what would come next. We'll be right back after these messages. They told us this was reality. They told us to stop asking questions. Now, Matt Bain, the detective, him talk to Hall now and I tell him, say, listen, say, this woman we claim so she named Jane Fuller, say she not exists. We can't find anything. We contacted the authorities in France, she not exists, right? So she possibly ain't real, or I'm saying, something about her is just weird, because when them check even Fuller's background, he never had a daughter. So him not really have much problems, because him find her quickly, because him go to this mart, right? And I check out some items, and when him look, him see the counterpart, right? It's not her at the time, but he must stare upon her, and the young lady is like, why you stare upon me? Take a picture, it will last longer. You know what I'm saying? And he's like, what I'm saying? It's one of them things, and he might try to explain himself. So, all now, I feel think to himself, this kind of short time work, as he must say, wait, something not right. Why is that happening? You know what I'm saying? Why should be behaving a way there if a she? So, him decides him going to perform a little experiment, right? So, he must say, him recognize say Fuller left that message for him. Why would Fuller leave that message for him in the simulation? Him don't know about the simulation. Him know say the simulation are real, because I did him to work on it. Only if him go and drive just like how Ashton drove, and he discovers a point in the world where it becomes a crude wireframe model. You hear me say? So Douglas thought that the reality that he inhabited was real. Only if recognized now, say, it's a simulation. He himself is a part of this simulation. He himself is a program in this simulation. So at the same time, when he discovered that now, Jane would have returned in to the counterpart, right? The flashy eye thing again, right? And she returned. So now we are confirmed by that. Say, yeah, she actually exists, but she's not in that simulation, right? She come from the world above, right? So she tries to explain the truth to Hall. She call him and she say, yo, me need to talk to you and thing and re. And the same time when they meet up at the place, in the Matrix, a parallel to the Matrix here, when Neo faces off with the Agent Smith and there is lightning and thunder and rain and everything, it's a similar, motif again here. Of course, he's indoors, so he's not getting wet. So I'm indoors and I'm gonna look out the window, just looking at the world like, none of this not real, right? None of this not real. It's like, yo, it's an existential crisis, right? So she revealed the truth to him that this world is one of thousands of virtual worlds, right? But these are the only one in which the occupants them ever developed a virtual world of their own, right? And she lives in the real world, right? The world outside of the 1990s Los Angeles simulation, yeah? So after the Fuller's death here, she entered the virtual, right? And assumed the data role and thing to gain control of the company, right? So that she can shut down the simulated 1937 reality, right? But she get a wrinkling of the plan. The plan has been wrinkled by Hall being made the company heir, right? So she also reveals now that Douglas would have been modeled after her David, her real world husband, right? And when she come to the simulation, she'd fall in love with Hal. Yeah. David are the one where that commit the murders, right? Because him start to ask now, Douglas start to ask, so who killed Hal, right? If it wasn't so and so, because she eliminated all of the suspects, them. So it's like, it was, your real world counterpart, David, my husband. So she says that, he has been broken basically from the first time him start use these things. It's almost like him using the virtual, mess him up bad and make him into the monster that he is. So him believe himself to be this deity, right? And that he controls certain things. So him come and him do as him like, him kill people as him like and whatever. And it is mostly due to prolonged usage. So he's very obsessed and addicted to this thing, right? Now, back at the 13th floor, right? I say the 30th floor, roll credits, but the 30th floor, is in the building, right? That's where they have the simulation. So Whitney, that's Jason Whitney, right? The mild-mannered colleague. He decides, say, him go enter the simulation. Now, Douglas, he don't want him, said, don't do it. Right? You don't want to go in there. But him decides, say, him curious enough for going there. So when him go in there, him find himself in a one car in the middle of traffic, almost run off our road. He run off our road still. So because he runs off of the road, a cop ask him for his papers. He finds a gun in the glove compartment and he's amazed by that. But I'm not let up because he don't really want the cop to trouble him. He wanted to continue to go on exploring, right? As the cop sees the papers and is, satisfied with what he sees, he's about to walk away. He hears a thump in the back of the trunk. Yeah, so the cop is like, sir, get out of the car. No cop not gonna make you go anywhere when you're thump in the back of a vehicle, right? So, of course, it start to be like, oh my, to himself like something going on. Kind of hear the thump and the noise, like a person making noise, like it's muffled, and he opens it and only to see Ferguson, but to him because him look like Douglas, he's like Douglas, and thing, and the officer's like back up, and thing, what I'm saying, and him like it's like him can't fathom what really happened. Why would his counterpart be doing this? And he steps back off the path, the side of the road, into a vehicle that is coming, and it hit him, kills him instantly. But what is interesting is what happens next. Because when he gets killed in the simulation, apparently, Ashton's consciousness crosses over instead of his. Because him connected into it, and Ashton probably they put Ashton into something, and I'm just thinking about the technicalities of it, how it could possibly work, right? Because this is just all fictional, right? So it's possible that it was that this consciousness was floating, and then with the body not having any consciousness to come back to other than that one, right? Because the consciousness got killed, Jason's consciousness got killed in there. Ashton wakes up in what he thinks is reality, right? Now, of course, it's awkward for the first few seconds because he comes out and he attempts to come out of the area where the machines are, right? But you need an ID card, which he has on, and you need to know how to use that ID card, right? And he doesn't know anything about this thing because, you know, he apparently has been living in his 1937, right? So, yeah, that red alarm bells, you know what I'm saying? Rings, rather, alarm bells, because security realized they might act strange and called Douglas, right? Now, Douglas apparently was romancing Jane Fuller, and he gets the call and thing to come to the office because Jason acts strange. But at the moment when he answer the phone is the same moment that Ashton finds out or figures out how to use the ID, you know, because the ID go up against the thing. And yeah, I just had to mention that little scene right there. Anyways, he goes to there and to the company, and him and Ashton attack, and him get to realize, say, it's not Jason you want to talk to anymore. So him's like, you know, you have to know the truth. You know what I'm saying? You know the truth. Say, your reality was fake, but also this one is fake. And I was like, what? What you talk about? That don't make no sense. You know what I'm saying? So Ashton say, yo, I want you to take me to where I was born. You know what I'm saying? As a computer simulation, and carry him go to the place and thing. While he was going there, in the elevator, right? He, that is Douglas, gets transformed into David, right? So when him show him where he was born, and Ashton is awed by it all, you know, he's amazed and thing. He took the gun, right? Oh, I forgot to mention that when Ashton take the gun, him take the gun off a security guard, right? So that gun now was, you know, it was placed near to where David was, and David took it up and shoots him, right? Of course, David isn't new to this thing, so he does it, you know, more than once, right? Because that's the thing he does, right? Now, Matt Bain seemed to have gotten wind of the nature of his reality through Jane. Jane called. This was a little after Douglas leaves to go to the company, right? She call and she tell him, say, for come because, you know what I'm saying, him gonna try to kill her and thing, right? So, of course, David goes to Douglas's home, but Jane not really realize yet, say, him is no longer Douglas. So, what lets up on it is when David has say, you know, oh, in hug her and thing, and you know what I'm saying, and he must say something to her, well, you know, gives up the whole thing, and she now is very terrified looking, you know, and thing, and he was like, I can see why you like this man because he's pretty handsome, you know, almost kind of, you know, referencing himself because he does the same look and all of that. She tell him, say, you know, no, she use him just like how him use the other people them and kill them and all of that, right? So he tries to rape and murder her. She, you know, hits him with something, and she runs out of the apartment. You know, she's wearing a towel, right? That's all she's wearing, right? I have to mention that part, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, she runs out of the apartment and, you know, gets on the elevator just in time for him almost go reach her, and she bites him on his fingers and him have to back up. Right? She gets down to the ground floor, but apparently the whole place lock up. So yeah, him did done plan out to him that do already saying him trap her in there. So he takes out the gun and is ready to take her out and thing, but yeah, Detective Matt Bain shows up just in time and kills David, right? And of course, you know, the next part going to be now, he's gonna wake up in the real world as Douglas. So I'll wake up and him notice say a newspaper say 2024. Yeah. And he has on this thing on his head like a like a little, it comes like a headset kind of thing, yeah. And when him take it off, you can hear it make that little sound like it a disconnect and thing, right? Now him walk out to where there seems to be like this living room area and thing, and he finds Jane, right, who has now awoken from her simulation as well, from the simulation as well, and she takes him and shows him that he's in real reality. Right? And we see Fuller, right, who is alive and well, but this Fuller is the actual Fuller from the reality, as they said, and this is her father, Annan Fuller, which the Fuller was modeled after, So she tell Hal that the simulation and thing, and that is when the film ends there, and then we notice that it collapses into a thin line, as if when you turn off one monitor screen our TV, and them screen, the old time screen with the CRT, and the line does at the last thing where you see come up on the, it does collapses, and then I hope I'm describing this clearly. Let me know if I did in the comments, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into this classic. So the 13th floor is built around a lot of layered realities, right? And most of these unresolved mysteries come from the fact that the film refuses to pin down a single true world. So the core question is not just who killed Fuller, but which level of this reality actually counts as real. These are some theories and unresolved mysteries and some plot points. So, the layers of reality. The clearest theory, right, is that we have 3 layers, right? It is the 1937 simulation, right, inside a 1999 simulation, inside a higher real world around the 2020s. Now, each layer is treated as ordinary life by the people who live inside it, right? Until something breaks that illusion. And a more unsettling theory is that the real world, 2020's world, may also be simulated, right? Or at least it is not guaranteed as the final layer, because the film set it up in a way where it suggests it could be an infinite regress, right? So whenever someone discovers that the world is fake, they may simply be stepping into another simulation. Yeah? Number 2 is Douglas's identity. It's a major mystery of whether Douglas Hall is ever truly himself, right? One theory is that Douglas is originally a simulated character and him become self-aware, right? And then him end up inhabiting the body of his creator, David, right? In the higher level. Now, another theory is that Douglas is also a hybrid, right? Him is part of the original person, as Jane in at it, because Jane was like, David was like you when I met him, you know what I'm saying? Nice and compassionate and pure. And he's part code, which makes him, his final survival in the real world, very, very ironic. Now, him escape one simulation only to become the person whose body is used to exist there, And this blurs the line between a victim and the replacement, right? Who killed Fuller? Obviously, it was David who killed Fuller. So the murder of Hanan Fuller is the plot's surface mystery, but the film makes it clear that the answer depends on which layer you're in. One theory is that David, the 2020s user controlling Douglas, him kill Fuller, right, in the 1990 layer to stop him from exposing the simulation. A second theory is that the murder is less important than what it reveals. That Fuller's discovery that the simulated people can become self-aware. These are living agents, yeah? Living AI, if you want me to give you that, analogy, right? The insight is a real threat because it implies the simulations, them no longer just using tools, but them can emerge into their own right. You know what I'm saying? Jane/Natasha, right? So Jane Fuller's identity is another unresolved point because there is one theory that she's genuinely Fuller's daughter from the 2020s, right? Using the 1990 simulation to investigate his death and protect the technology. Another darker theory is that she's actually Natasha, a woman from the 1990s there who had taken over Jane's identity in the higher world to gain control of the simulation system, right? And this fits with the whole film's theory that the identity is transferable and can be weaponized. That's a far off one, but yeah. So the nature of consciousness is another one. The film leaves open whether simulated people have real consciousness. And one theory is that the self-awareness is an emergent property. Once a simulation is complex enough, its inhabitants them generally feel and think, even if they become code. Another theory is that the story is warning about playing God. If simulated beings can become conscious, then the creators are not just engineers, but jailers of entire populations, which makes Douglas and Jane, their happy endings, seem very, very morally complicated. The quote-unquote real world's morality at the top layer, right, it is ethically murky, right? Because one theory is that the 2020s society is a decadent and them use simulation as playgrounds, right? The fact said, Jane mentioned, say there are thousands of these worlds and stuff, and this one is the only one that became self-aware through using simulation, right? And this explains why David treats Douglas's life and others as disposable, right? A broader theory is that the film is a critique on escapism itself. Every layer is a refuge from something: grief, guilt, and responsibility. And the technology enabling people to live out them fantasies without consequences, right? And at the end of this, those fantasies will start killing across layers. And of course, we have to talk about the ending. The final shot of Douglas and Jane looking out as Jane tries to explain to Douglas something, and we see that, glitch kind of effect with the, as if somebody just turned off a TV, you know what I'm saying, or a monitor or something. Yeah. So that suggests that there is somehow this real world that we are witnessing is real enough to them, and maybe it's just another level of control, similar to the Matrix. And those are my theories. What are your theories? Share your favorite theories, moments, characters, your favorite anything. If you liked how I sing in the last episode, or if you prefer that I not do these singing things, you let me know down in the comments. In this episode, we looked at the 13th floor, virtual realities, hidden truths, and the nature of existence. And when I started this episode, I completely went haywire, especially because of the fact that there is so much I could pack into this episode, but I didn't want it to be as long as the others. So I try to keep it as slim as possible. But I have to mention that, you know, these podcast episodes have been quite interesting to do. It's quite a journey. And I'm here continuing on this journey. And as usual, I have to just appeal for more support. It pushes this podcast higher. It gets it out to all the ears that can listen, right? Because I'm sure that you watch these films with me and the TV shows, and you might come back and you say, hey, what Andre say about this, I completely support. Or I don't. I understand. If you don't support it, you don't have to agree with me on everything, right? And we can have the discourse, why you don't agree. So at least, I know, and I can just drop in something on the other episodes, or I can do an episode. I can say, hey, this is what it is. So you can even give me ideas as to how I can do these things, right? So again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. That brings us to the end of this episode. Our voyage through the universe of sci-fi television continues, and the next destination is 5,000 downloads. Your support keeps this mission alive. Follow, share, and let's keep exploring together. Until next time, stay curious. This content is CAN credentialed, which means you can report instances of harassment, abuse, or other harm on their hotline at 617-249-4255 or on their website at creatoraccountabilitynetwork.org.